In recent times, there has been somewhat of a pushback towards strength focus for hypertrophy enthusiasts, and although the intentions are pure, I don't believe the conclusions are correct. In my opinion, training with strength in mind is still important, and I do care about numbers. So in today's video, I'll explain exactly why. First, let's talk about strength charts. I fully agree that we cannot use absolute numbers to draw one-to-one muscle growth inferences. In other words, it's false to assert that anyone who benches 3 plates will at least have a 43-inch chest with 6-inch arms. Same for lower body. If one squats 4 plates and deadlifts 5, they may or may not have tree trunk legs of at least 25 inches. Now, is it likely that most lifters who acquire such standards would have these measurements? Absolutely. And this is what we've seen throughout the years, and charts tend to be refined over many decades. There is a general association where strength status seems to reflect one's physique, particularly at the advanced and elite levels, where it is almost impossible not to be well muscled. This is even more true when going beyond the big 3, which every non-powerlifter should do. That means setting standards on a variety of big movements like OHB, benching from different angles, weighted pull-ups, weighted dips, RDLs, squat variations, etc. And don't forget about isolation work. You can't be lazy here and expect to optimize your physique. That said, even when strength is balanced, there's still no guarantee that you'll look a certain way after reaching any set number. This has to do with genetics, leverages, and specificity of training, which can skew the strength to size ratio. However, just because this is true, that doesn't mean strength standards are now worthless, since at a bare minimum, we know that basic charts provide realistic numbers for average naturals that, once fulfilled, net a solid base for overall mass. And criticizers know this. So then, what are they actually not fond of? One is the lack of precision for muscle growth, because n equals 1, and we can't equate strength numbers with muscle numbers between individuals. And 2, the fact that many hypertrophy enthusiasts will abandon their primary goals to pursue arbitrary goals that may not even apply to them, or in general, run high specificity, usually powerlifting-centric programs that neglect important aspects of hypertrophy training, or at best, simply don't contribute towards anything extra. So the training becomes less efficient and can lead to drastically altering technique to acquire more PRs. Basically, the opposite of getting more out of less weight. So as you can see, the discussion was always about overemphasizing strength and doing whatever it takes to beat records, oftentimes resorting to tactics that won't speed up the muscle gaining process. And on that point, I couldn't agree more. You need straight priorities, which many lifters lost sight of and ended up in a deep rabbit hole of becoming strength athletes when that was never their objective. So with these facts in mind, should we now disregard all strength standards if we bias hypertrophy? To me, the answer is a clear no, since most lifters are still weak novices who need a relatable, achievable goal. And for experienced lifters, it's not about lifting X to guarantee X. It's about using standards as proxies for your own ratios. So let's say you're that person who didn't get the promised muscle size or actually surpassed your expectations yet are not that strong. Guess what? The outcome doesn't matter, because what you now understand is how progression scales for you. That's the major takeaway here. And whether the ratio is favorable or not, you don't have to modify your training to correct it. Instead, accept that this is your build and relate that to the charts accordingly. So to simplify things in a hypertrophy context, the lifts that we're blessed at will typically require higher numbers to compensate, whereas harder lifts don't require as much performance gain. For example, someone with a deadlifter's build who matches the 3-plate bench press of a bencher's build will usually have much bigger pecs, shoulders, and triceps given the superior range of motion. Likewise, the bencher who is completely bent forward may very well have similar spinal erector or back development, despite lifting 100 pounds less. Which means that the strength standards should be upscaled or downscaled depending on anthropometry or genetics. Individual rate of progression dictates this. That's why in the last 5 years, I've stated multiple times that you don't need a 2-plate bench, 3-plate squat, and 4-plate deadlift to be intermediate. Linear progression may have stopped way before that, or maybe it never did, and now you have what would normally be described as advanced numbers. Yet, you're still physiologically a novice, hence not looking the biggest. Likewise, You may appear bigger, yet not have the commonly prescribed numbers that others got much sooner than you. Actually, allow me to relate this concept to the game classic World of Warcraft. Here, max levels scale depending on the expansion, but you can be playing any version at any given time and still be at the top of your class. The advantage lifter is like being in Wrath of the Lich King, since more leveling is required, whereas the disadvantage lifter is stuck in vanilla. In this case, being 3 max levels apart, each expansion represents a plus 10 increase in level. So a level 60, 70, and 80 character are all elite, yet the absolute levels aren't the same. This is how I view intermediate, advanced, and elite strength standards for hypertrophy. In real life, the expansions are randomized, so you don't have a choice in selecting. You just gotta play and find out where you lie. If you want another WoW example, how about we just compare Vanilla to Shadowlands, or the Burning Crusade to Dragonflight? In both instances, the max levels are 60 and 70, yet the leveling up processes are faster in the modern versions. What is that equivalent to? Running a high specificity strength program, or being an outlier. But if that is you, then you must keep yourself in check with programming, or recognize that your true max level is higher than this current expansion. Makes sense? It doesn't mean that the other expansions don't exist or are dated, especially for other players. So that is how strength standards can become more accurate predictors of growth, by eliminating the cookie cutter competition component. And this is precisely what I do in my training. None of my goal standards are based off what others are doing unless it's old school inspired, and I strictly care about strength for what I lift. It's all about raising my previous best PRs, and in that case, whenever I upgrade a level, it always shows in my physique. You can even look at the upload date of a video and tell how advanced it was. And for some exercises, I can quantify which jumps did it. So in recent times, going from a 4 to 5 plate squat literally equated to 1.5 inches on my legs. Going from an advanced bench to elite resulted in 3 inches for chest. A 250 total pull-up to over 330 represented the craziest increase in lat size yet. For overhead pressing, going from 135 to over 185 for reps blew up my lag and delts like nothing else. And this approach is what I'm still doing moving forward. I recently hit 3 plates on the incline bench. I can tell you that once I can match this again from one angle higher, my upper chest will be popping out more. Recently did 4.5 plates for 9 on the RDL. Next target is 5 plates and my cake will explode. If I go from 50 pounds to 60 pounds for reps on the dumbbell curls and 80 to 135 on dual rope pushdowns, my arms will be well over 17 inches. These are not random numbers. They're based off previous successes, and therefore the predicted gains tend to be correct because there are no shortcuts at this level. Strength plus muscle can't not happen together since there are no noob gains and I'm technically proficient at everything. And to top it off, my training is highly generalized with frequent exercise rotations. So no one can say, oh, it's because of specificity and peaking, which I don't even do. Being the jack of all trades makes it easier to pinpoint what's causing the gains. And at some point, we just have to accept this and look at the common denominator, which is indeed hypertrophy. Now for those who say, oh, you don't have to get stronger to get bigger, but you can get bigger to get stronger, and progressive overload might not be the cause of hypertrophy, but the sign itself. Listen, does this play on words really matter in the grand scheme of things? The net result and process is practically the same. So why not simplify your journey and set applicable standards to keep you focused? It's funny that those who greatly benefit from strength standards are the two polar opposite kinds of lifters. Those who need them the least, elite, and those who need them the most, novices. The point is, none of us are getting weaker yet bigger. And anyone who claims this is being disingenuous. You can quote me on that. Because even when we look at pure strength athletes, many go through hypertrophy blocks, but during those blocks, they're not displaying maximum performance. But does that mean that physiologically the muscles are weaker? No. They actually have more force potential and always come out stronger. The way I view this is like making a large bonfire. The more wood you throw in it, the greater the fire will be. But if nothing's been lit yet, then you can stack all the wood you want, but without that spark, you'll never know how much bigger the fire could have been compared to previous times. It's the same with building muscle. You may be temporarily weaker due to training in a completely different manner, but assuming you haven't lost muscle or even gained some, then 100% of the time, if you were to go through a proper strength phase or just got more specific, then you would exceed your previous best within a short duration. So if I focus on bodybuilding for the next 3 years, put on legit lean tissue verified through DEXA scans, then proceed to run a bench press specialization program, I bet you my YouTube account that I can easily surpass 405 within months. That's the only logical outcome, indicating that strength and size were never truly separate, just on sleep mode, if you want to call it that. It's misleading to state otherwise, which I've seen some biased natties exclaim. This is especially true on highly coordinated, unstable movements like weighted dips. For example, I haven't been doing them for almost a year now, but I'm the strongest I've ever been in my life. Do you think I can hit 5 plates for 1 rep? Right now, that's extremely unlikely, though I put on at least 5 pounds of muscle since my previous PR. So does this mean I got weaker yet bigger? No, as proved by all my other presses. So there's a thing called low carryover, but the individual muscles can still get stronger. In this case, all I have to do is reintroduce the movement pattern, and in no time at all, I'd be right back at 5 plates and maybe even hit 250. Basically, there's no chance of permanently losing strength, yet becoming way bigger. In fact, the reversal is what's actually observed in the data. It's to the point where hypertrophy has been labeled as the #1 correlating variable to improve strength in experienced athletes, all things being equal. A recent April 2022 study proved this, where there was a correlation coefficient of 0.83. You rarely find statistically significant findings like this in exercise science research. Like, it's so mind-bogglingly insane that we can quite literally predict who will win a powerlifting competition based off scanning for body composition. Assuming everyone was technically proficient and peaked, hypertrophy would make the difference between winning and losing. And this is why even in those skinny, relative strength outliers, and yes, that is what they are, they will still get bigger when moving up the goalpost. So if a man can squat 5 plates at 148 with 24-inch legs, that doesn't mean strength and size don't correlate with him. It just scales differently, as I explained earlier. So he would need to get 545 or even 585 to get that extra inch or more, whereas most normal weight males would have surpassed this leg size squatting in the 400s. So we can't then say, oh, strength doesn't matter because it doesn't apply to this 1 in a million guy, because this example is flawed and, interestingly, incorrect, since he'll still need to get bigger. Plus, the suggestion is not just squat 6 plates, bro, because he can get stronger at harder variations and at the same hypertrophy. So the only real exception is if someone detrains muscles that don't help the primary movers of a specialized lift, yet they continue getting stronger at it, making their overall physique look worse. A perfect example for this is Johnny Candido, but that's only when examining some muscles like biceps, delts, and maybe lats. His chest and legs certainly didn't shrink, and even he admits that his lower body fat free mass index increased. And is that a surprise? Coupled with extreme fluff, and much of the muscular separation is hidden, which is the fundamental aesthetic game changer. You see what I'm saying? If size and strength can't even be separated in every nitpicked outlier example, what makes you think that you're somehow special? Do average viewers of YouTube Fitness really need to be told that strength doesn't matter? Like, no one is saying to neglect accessory work or be specialized towards competition movements, because that's another strawman argument. All guys like me are saying is to monitor the numbers on movements that are important to you, because if nothing is going up for months, yet you apparently train hard, you hit enough volume, and you eat a lot, then you need to reevaluate what you're doing. Sure, gaining muscle is slow, but an objective performance metric in your program should improve. And I'm sure as hell not talking about 1 rep maxes, so stop with the powerlifting comparisons. This needs to stop, it's extreme. It could be as simple as adding a rep here and there. If that's not happening, you've essentially plateaued, and won't randomly overcome this by letting progression happen automatically when that's clearly not working. It often sounds excellent on paper, but sometimes we do need to get a little bit proactive, and being mindful of strength will ensure that you stay accountable instead of constantly spinning your wheels. And that's another thing. It's easy to get lazy and lose that killer instinct when there's not much to measure. And unfortunately, after you've been at this game for long enough, gaining muscle is not an easy task, and the measurements won't go up nearly as much as they used to, meaning it might take the whole year or even longer before the measuring tape proves your progress. And sometimes it might not even happen, which is a real bummer. It's like grinding through a dungeon, opening up the final treasure chest, only to discover it's empty. You only learn the truth after the work was done. And it's the same with training. Strength never leaves you in the dark. And assuming all the correct variables for hypertrophy are included, you can trust that this trackable progressive overload is indeed more than neurological. These PRs will add up, keep you psychologically sane, and have you crave more instead of settling. So your perception of progress will always be high, because on paper, the math is consistent. There's no stagnation. Compare that to only tracking lean body mass or measurements, and strength is a better report card. It's like experiencing more semesters of which the grades provide additional feedback. So that's why I always say, I'm making all kinds of gains, because it's true. It doesn't matter that my physique might not look that different from now in 4 months, because if all my lifts went up by 30 pounds, I'm a happy man. And one day, these minuscule improvements will add up to be something great. This is what you'll experience as well. So with that said, guys, I'll leave off on those basic points. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I want to hear your feedback. Is strength worth considering for most lifters? Let me know, and I'll talk to you all next time.